Hello, Chris Noosh here. So it is Saturday night. It's about, 10:17 at night. I've been working in the yard all day today. We took down 10 bushes after a busy week in which I took a week off from my weekly vlog that I do everything where I document what I'm doing in the studios. So, what am I going to do this week? Well, I'm going to talk to you. And you've probably seen by the title that I'm going to talk to you about some past work. Because for the past 60-some weeks, I have been documenting my process and the work that I'm working on. And you've seen all of that if you've seen all of my vlogs. And if you haven't, go check them out. They're kind of fun. But today, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you some old work that has never been featured in the vlog before. And this week, I'm going to start from the beginning. I'm going to start at my first printmaking class, and I'm going to go for a couple minutes, about 10 or so minutes of talking about it and showing that work. And that is what I'm going to do today. So that's what you're going to see. Let me show you the work that I did in my very first printmaking class in college. So my Print 1 class at Kennesaw State University was the introductory class to printmaking. The first project, the goal of that class was to introduce everyone to most of the forms of printmaking. We were not going to see all of the forms of printmaking, but we're going to experience most of them in that class. So the overall theme of the class is that you pick a theme of work, something that you want to work around, and all of the prints that you make are going to call back to that theme. The theme that I chose was toys. I'm a child at heart, even still today at 34 years old? That sounds about right. So my theme was toys. The first project was a block print. This was done into actually a piece of linoleum, so similar to the way that I work today. So this is the very first time that I, Chris Noosh, had carved a block. So this print right here is the reason why I continued and still work in this method. I really, really, really enjoyed the whole process. My brain works in this way. My brain works in terms of line and light and dark and things going from light to dark in terms of gradients. So, and also my brain is very graphic, and block printing can't help but be a very graphic process. So this was the Magic 8 Ball, and you see it's a self-portrait of me at the time reading what my Magic 8 Ball prediction would be. I don't remember what I asked the Magic 8 Ball, but this is the very first block print that I have ever made. The second project from the class was a dry point etching. And what that means is this drawing that you see was first drawn onto a sheet of paper in my sketchbook, like everything else I've ever done ever in the history of my life. And then I took a diamond point etching needle and scratched that drawing into the surface of a piece of plexiglass. So this is different from traditional etching, which you'll see later, because instead of being engraved into a sheet of metal, this is drawn into a sheet of plexiglass. Once you draw it on the sheet of plexiglass, you take a piece of hard card and very lightly push the ink down into the engraved lines of the plexiglass, and then you wipe away all the ink that was on the surface of the block. Well, it's not a block. The piece of plexiglass, the plate. The plate is the name of it. So you wipe away all of the ink that is not in the lines and that's just sitting on the surface of the plate. And then you print that onto a sheet of paper using intense pressure. And you can use the same press that I use for my relief blocks. That is technically called an etching press. I use it for block printing, but this is the namesake of that press. So continuing with the toys theme that I have going on, this is a barrel of monkeys. It goes with the goofy, fun drawing style that I just like to employ pretty much at all times in my work. Just a fun drawing. For all of the work from here on out, we were also asked to employ a method of coloring a print. This method of coloring a print was watercolor on top of the already printed print. So this is just a print that I grabbed and I painted with watercolor on top of it. Pretty self-explanatory here. Nothing too complicated, but it really does bring to life the drawing of the etching, the dry point etching underneath it. So this was the second project in my toys theme for the class. The third project that we worked on was an actual big boy etching. This piece was etched into a piece of zinc. It was a zinc plate, and to do that, we needed to use acid. So I used the same techniques of drawing into the plate with a diamond point etching needle. But before I drew into it, the surface of the plate was covered with a ground, and basically the ground, all that does is it controls where the acid will hit the plate. So, and it also controls how light and dark the lines are. So for example, this piece was dipped in to the acid a number of times. Probably at least 10 different times. The darker lines that you see were dipped into the acid a lot longer than the lighter lines. The longer that the plate is in the acid for, the deeper the line is etched into the plate. And you don't want to keep it in too long because it will dissolve your entire plate over time. But the lines on the child's face in the background were probably done for at least a minute or two, while the lines in the foreground that you see that are like really dark along the army soldiers' backs and the shadow areas on the arms and on the table, those lines, they may have been in the acid bath for probably 5 to 10 minutes, somewhere in that range. The color technique that I used for this print is called Shinkale, and actually looking at the image that I have up on the screen, it's actually a really poor example of Shinkale. And all Shinkale means, it's a French word, and I'm going to make this up. It's a French word for cut paper onto the block and printing it. So basically you take really thin paper and you put glue on the back of it and you put the paper onto the block where you want it to be before you even put the paper down. Then you put the paper down and the pressure of the press as it prints it will adhere the paper, the cut paper, to the paper and then print on top of the paper. I've said paper a lot of times. But that's basically how it is. You're basically gluing paper to paper and printing on top of that paper. It's a technique that's actually really lovely, and I really should employ it more often. I really do enjoy it. And hopefully I do it better than this, but it can get a little messy and it's a little time sensitive because you're working with glue and you want to get the glue printed before it dries. So there's a lot that goes into it, but it's not all that complicated. I love working with it and I should do it again. Maybe that'll be a challenge coming up here in the next couple weeks as I look for things to spice up my vlog. The fourth project was a project, it's called Aqua Tint. This is also done onto a zinc plate it's an etching technique. For this project, we were not allowed to use line at all, and as you can imagine, my head exploded when I was told I was not allowed to use line. I could only use shapes and value. So same method here, kind of. We did a light misting of spray paint onto the surface of the block, and that really gave you a nice dot pattern to use to etch into the plate. And then you paint it on the ground or whatever you're blocking out before dipping your plate into the acid. And once again, the same concept. Everything that is white in this either never touched the acid at all or was in the acid bath for a very, very short period of time. And anything that is very dark or very black was in the acid longer. So the very blackest of blacks that you see up on the top could have been in the acid bath for as long as not 20 minutes, probably about 10 to 15 minutes for this one. Maybe not even that long. So this is Aqua Tint. Aqua Tint, Aqua Tint, Aqua Tint. Oh, and of course, you're seeing Mr. Potato Head. It's a construction worker, Mr. Potato Head in the background. In the foreground is like a tiny little potato, a little spud, with giant eyes, just kind of goofy. I think he has his tongue sticking out, but it's hard to read that So this is my Aqua Tint. Of all the color techniques I'm going to show you in this video, this one is by far the most complicated one. So when you etch the plate of these, you apply the ink to the surface of the plate using a card, much like line etch. But for this specific one, instead of using all black ink and then wiping it away and only using the ink that's stuck into the little grooves that have been etched into it, this one, it has all of the colors of the rainbow. And so for every different little color field you see, I had to carefully paint on, just place on really, scrape on the ink of that specific color to that specific area. So where you see the blue ink is probably the easiest way to see how that works. The blues of the shoes bleeds in to the brown of the table. So I wasn't very careful in where the ink was going in that area, but it's hard to be because as you paint it on, you also have to rub it off very, very carefully, and then the ink has a tendency to mix in different areas, which creates a really nice little hazy effect that could be nice and for like really good transitional areas. But I really enjoy how this piece came out, but I just want to just press on you the complicatedness of this really simple image. So that is my a la poupée. That's the name of the technique, if I haven't said it before. The a la poupée Aqua Tint Mr. Potato Head print. And last but not least, it is the ever mighty lithograph. And for these, so we didn't really have a great lithograph setup. We didn't have any stones the whole time I was there, which is the traditional way of doing a lithograph. It's on a big piece of, I think it's granite. I'm just going to call it stone because I could be wrong on that. And anybody in printmaking listening, I was like, no, you idiot, it's not granite. I don't know. I honestly don't know. I just know it's a big old thick stone. It's very complicated, but lithograph, it works on the idea that oil and water do not mix. So you use an oil-based pencil to draw on to a plate. This one is done, it's called a Polyplate Litho. And so you kind of use that same concept, but you can use it's a ballpoint pen on a piece of plastic, basically. So that is how I created this image. So I drew with a ballpoint pen on the piece of plastic, a very, very thin piece of plastic. It's like a sheet of paper, but it's like plasticky and kind of rough. It's got a little bit of a tooth to it. So you draw with a ballpoint pen onto that sheet, and then you can use the concept of oil and water don't mix to create prints out of it. And these prints don't, the Polyplate Litho prints don't have a very long shelf life. We could make about 4 to 5 of them before the plate really started to deteriorate. So we had to be kind of really careful and fingers crossed that the image worked out the first time. Otherwise, we were back to the drawing board to make the plate again. So in this image, I have got the Rock'em Sock'em robots. We got the red rocker and the blue bopper, I think is his name. And this particular piece, I don't have an image of my flat black and white for this one, but I'm sure it exists. This piece is a colored image of the black and white, which is, it's much more interesting. But to make it even more interesting than that, I layered this print. So I've got the top, the ring post, the little yellow post with the white lines coming out of it, are cut out of paper and set forward, and then the robots themselves are on a second layer, and then you've got the third layer with the yellow post in the background with the strings, and then the watercolor elements to make it look like it's an actual boxing ring or photos being taken, and that's just using salt and watercolor to get that sort of technique, which is really fun. So this was my last and final effort in my Print 1 class at Kennesaw State University. There you have it. It's all done. Finished. Finito. This was it. So the last 5 prints that you saw were all of the prints that I did in a 9-week period of time when I was learning the basics of printmaking. And basically, these 5 prints caused me to fall in love with printmaking and decide to make it my life, really. I guess that's where I'm at. So, yeah. And so that is all I have for you this week. Thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out with me. Thanks for viewing my old work. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And I will see y'all again next week. Thanks. Bye. To anyone wondering where Marty just jumped to, she jumped into her little crate that I've got sitting here. When I'm working down in the studio at night, she likes to sleep in her little crate. You can see her 2 little eyes looking at you. It's dark in there, so I don't want to shine a light too much on her face, but she is in her crate. Bum-ba-da-bum-ba-da-bum-ba-da-bum-bum-cha. Should I make that my outro? I've never done an outro before. All right. See y'all later. Bye.